Now the next sutta is 9.2.21. Monks, in 3 ways, men of northern Kuru, Uttara Kuru, excel both the Tavatimsa Devas, Devas of the 33, and men of Jambudvipa, that means human beings. In what 3? I'll stop here for a moment just to comment. This northern Kuru or Uttara Kuru is supposed to be one of the 4 great islands or continents which was supposed to surround Mount Simeru. Every world system is supposed to have a sun and a Mount Simeru, which is surrounded by 4 continents. To the north is Uttara Kuru, to the south is Jambudvipa, to the east is Puba Diveha, and to the west is Aparagoyana. Now, at the moment, we scientists can't see these 4 continents, but perhaps it could be that these are in the astral world, fine material world that we cannot see with the human eye, just like we cannot see devas, heavenly beings, and ghosts. But slowly now, scientists are able to take photographs of ghosts using infrared photography. So slowly they realize there are such things. So to continue the sutta, the Buddha said, the men of Uttara Kuru excel the Tavatimsa Devas. Tavatimsa Devas are the Devas of the 33, where Sakka Devaraja is the chief. And men of Jambudvipa are us, we human beings. In what 3? Their special qualities are unselfishness, lack of greed, and fixity of lifespan. Unselfishness, lack of greed, and fixity of lifespan. Monks, in these 3 ways, men of Uttara Kuru excel both the Tavatimsa Devas and men of Jambudvipa. Monks, in 3 ways, the Tavatimsa Devas excel both the men of Uttara Kuru and men of Jambudvipa. In what 3? In their celestial life, beauty and happiness. Monks, in these 3 ways, the Tavatimsa Devas excel both the men of Uttara Kuru and men of Jambudvipa. Monks, in 3 ways, the men of Jambudvipa excel both the men of Uttara Kuru and the Tavatimsa Devas. In what 3? They are heroic, possess mindfulness, and the holy life may be lived there. Monks, in these 3 ways, men of Jambudvipa excel both men of Uttara Kuru and Devas of the Tavatimsa heaven. That's the end of the sutta. So the thing about human beings stated here is we human beings are heroic, very brave. It has its good and its bad points. Its good points is that we are very heroic. The bad point, if you are very brave, is that sometimes men dare to do totally frightening things, like kill their parents, kill an arahant. These things human beings dare to do. Lie and commit great evil deeds that bring them to the hells and the woeful plains. So, as being heroic has its bad points also. And then we possess mindfulness. And the holy life may be lived here. We have the Sangha of monks, whereas in the heavens and in Uttara Kuru, I think they don't have the Sangha of monks. And because we possess mindfulness, we can practice the holy life and we can get out of samsara. The next sutta is 9.3.23. Monks, I will teach the 9 conditions rooted in craving. Listen, pay heed, I will speak. And what are the 9 conditions rooted in craving? Seeking comes into being because of craving. Acquisition because of seeking. decision making because of acquisition, lustful desire because of decision making, attachment because of lustful desire, appropriation because of attachment, avarice because of appropriation, guarding because of avarice, and many a bad and wicked state of things arises from the act of guarding, the taking up of stick and sword, quarrels, disputes, arguments, strife, abuse, lying, and other evil, unskilled states. These monks are the 9 conditions that have their root in craving. That's the end of the sutta. So here the Buddha is saying that because of craving, we seek, and seeking brings about acquisition. Acquisition brings about decision making. Decision making brings about lustful desire. Lustful desire brings about attachment. Attachment brings about appropriation. Appropriation brings about guarding. And from guarding those things that we desire, then we take up the stick and the sword, and we quarrel, and we lie, and we fight, etc. The next sutta is 9.3.26. Once when the Venerable Sariputta and the Venerable Chandika Putta were dwelling near Rajagaha in the bamboo grove at the squirrels' feeding ground, the Venerable Chandika Putta addressed the monks, saying, "Reverend sirs, Devadatta taught Dhamma to the monks thus. When, sirs, the mind of a monk is heaped around with thoughtfulness, it is proper for that monk to explain, I know that birth is destroyed, the holy life lived, done is what was to be done, and there is no more of this to come." I'll just stop here for a moment. This Devadatta was one of the disciples of the Buddha. And at first he was a very good monk, and he attained the jhanas and attained the psychic powers. But later, because of greed, because of wanting to take over the position of the Buddha, he lost his psychic powers, and later he even tried to harm the Buddha. So Devadatta had quite a reputation. So that is why this Reverend Chandika Putta is quoting Devadatta. And the sutta continues. Now when he had thus spoken, the Venerable Sariputta said, "Nay, Reverend Chandika Putta, Devadatta taught not Dhamma so, but he taught the monks thus. When the mind of a monk is well heaped around with thoughtfulness, it is proper for that monk so to explain, I know that birth is destroyed, the holy life lived, done is what was to be done, and there is no more of this to come." A second time the Venerable Chandika Putta spoke in like manner, and the second time the Venerable Sariputta replied as before. A third time the Venerable Chandika said, "Reverend sirs, Devadatta taught Dhamma to the monks thus. When, sirs, the mind of a monk is heaped around with thoughtfulness, it is proper for that monk to explain, I know that birth is destroyed, the holy life lived, done is what was to be done, and there is no more of this to come." When he had thus spoken, the Venerable Sariputta for a third time said, "Nay, Reverend Chandika Putta, Devadatta taught not Dhamma so, but he taught the monks thus. When the mind of a monk is well heaped around with thoughtfulness, it is proper for that monk so to explain, I know that birth is destroyed, the holy life lived, done is what was to be done, and there is no more of this to come." Now we come to Sutta 9.4.33. The Buddha said, "Monks, I will teach you these 9 attainments of gradual abidings. Listen, pay heed, I will speak. And what, monks, are the 9 attainments? Where sense desires end, and those who have ended sense desires so abide, surely those venerable men, craving not and cool, have by that very fact crossed over and gone beyond, I say. Where do sense desires end, and who, having ended sense desires, so abide? I know not this, I see not this. Who should speak thus? To him this ought to be said. Consider, reverend sir, the monk who, aloof from sense desires, aloof from unwholesome states, enters and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of seclusion. There sense desires end, and those who have ended sense desires so abide. Surely the guileless man, without deceit, would rejoice and be glad at this response and say, well said, and thereafter with joined hands honor and reverence him. Just stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is talking actually about jhana states, states of concentration. And in these states of concentration, starting from the first jhana, sense desires end. And the Buddha says that where sense desires end, and those who have ended sense desires so abide, surely those venerable men, craving not and cool, nibbutta, have by that very fact crossed over and gone beyond paragata. This statement, they have become cool, nibbutta, and have crossed over and gone beyond paragata, is normally used for the arahant, a state where the arahant is supposed to have become enlightened. And the Buddha is using this for the jhana states, which shows the great respect and the great veneration the Buddha puts in the jhana states of concentration. And then later the Buddha goes on to describe the first jhana. The state of the first jhana is among aloof from sense desires, aloof from unwholesome states, enters and abides in the first jhana. So to be able to enter the first jhana, you have to be aloof or secluded from sense desires, aloof or secluded from unwholesome states, which means that the first jhana is a state which is totally wholesome, wholly wholesome, because it is aloof from unwholesome states. So here the Buddha says that if you, after hearing this, that the person who abides in the first jhana, there sense desires end, and the one who has ended sense desires abides in that state, then that person, then anyone who hears that should rejoice and be glad, and should honor and reverence him. And the Buddha continues, where thought applied and sustained, where applied thought and sustained thought and those who have ended such thoughts so abide, surely those venerable men, craving not and cool, have by that very fact crossed over and gone beyond, I say. Where do they end, and who, having ended them, so abide? Consider, sir, the monk who, with the stilling of applied and sustained thought, enters and abides in the second jhana, which has internal self-confidence and singleness of mind, without applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of concentration. Surely the guileless man would rejoice at this response. So I stop here. So in the state of the second jhana, the Buddha says that the person has to still applied and sustained thought. Applied and sustained thoughts have to end before he can enter the second jhana. which has internal self-confidence and singleness of mind, without applied and sustained thought, but with delight and pleasure born of concentration. Then the Buddha continues, where delight ends, and those who have ended delight so abide. Surely those venerable men, craving not and cool, have by that very fact crossed over and gone beyond, I say. Where do they end, and who, having ended them, so abide? Consider, sir, the monk who, with the fading away of delight, abides in equanimity and mindful and aware, enters and abides in the third jhana and experiences pleasure with his body, whereof the Aryans declare, he that is equanimous and mindful has a joyful abiding. There delight ends, and those who have ended it so abide. Surely the guileless man would rejoice at this response. We'll stop here again. So here the state of the third jhana, you see that delight has to fade away. And among, when he enters and abides in the third jhana, he is said to be equanimous and mindful, and has a joyful abiding. So you see this state of the third jhana is very clear that it is a mindful state, because some people, they have a mistaken idea that jhanas are states of unmindfulness, as though in a trance, but states of jhana are intense states of mindfulness. The mind is very clear and very strong and equanimous. And because the mind is equanimous, that is why there is no tendency to lust for jhana, unlike sensual pleasures. Sensual pleasures, and there is delight, but the mind is not equanimous, and because of that the mind is very active. There is a tendency to lust for that kind of pleasure, but not with states of high concentration. And then the Buddha continues, where equanimous pleasure ends, and those who have ended it so abide. Surely those venerable men, craving not and cool, have by that very fact crossed over and gone beyond, I say. Where do they end, and who, having ended them, so abide? Consider, sir, the monk who, with the abandoning of bodily pleasure and the previous abandoning of bodily pain, by the fading away of joy and grief, he enters and abides in the fourth jhana, which has complete purity of mindfulness and equanimity, and has neither pain nor pleasure. There equanimous pleasure ends, and those who have ended it so abide. Surely the guileless man would rejoice at this response. Stop here again for a moment. So in the state of the fourth jhana, bodily pleasure and bodily pain and mental joy and mental grief have ended before that person can enter into the fourth jhana, which is a state of complete purity of mindfulness and equanimity. So here again, you see that the fourth jhana is a state of perfect mindfulness. It is not an unmindful state. And the Buddha continues, where perceptions of form end, and those so abide. Surely those venerable men, craving not and cool, have by that very fact crossed over and gone beyond, I say. Where do they end, and who, having ended them, so abide? Consider, sir, the monk who, unattentive to the perceptions of the manifold, enters and abides in the sphere of infinite space. There perceptions of form end, and those who have ended them so abide. Surely the guileless man would rejoice at this response. So stop here again for a moment. So here the Buddha is talking about the first arupa jhana, which is the sphere of infinite space. Here the mind opens up to infinite space, so that the mind becomes boundless in a way. And in this state, perceptions of the manifold, the Pali word is anatta, and it also means diversity. Here, the monk is unattentive, he's not aware of perceptions of diversity. That means he doesn't see all beings as individuals. He doesn't consider all beings as individuals. And this is the beginning of the perception of no self. The mind opens up and he feels as though all beings are one in his mind. That is why jhana states are very important for insight. The higher wisdom. Because when a person comes out of those states, the insights are not the same as a person who uses the normal mind. Then the Buddha continues, where the perception of the sphere of infinite space ends, and those who have ended it so abide, surely those venerable men, craving not and cool, have by that very fact crossed over and gone beyond, I say. Where do they end, and who, having ended them, so abide? Consider, sir, the monk who, thinking consciousness is infinite, enters and abides in the sphere of infinite consciousness. There the perception of the sphere of infinite space ends, and those who have ended it so abide. Surely the guileless man would rejoice at this response. Where the perception of the sphere of infinite consciousness ends, and those who have ended it so abide, surely those venerable men, craving not and cool, have by that very fact crossed over and gone beyond, I say. Where do they end, and who, having ended them, so abide? Consider, sir, the monk who, thinking there is nothing, enters and abides in the sphere of nothingness. There the perception of the sphere of infinite consciousness ends, and those who have ended it so abide. Surely the guileless man would rejoice at this response. Where the perception of the sphere of nothingness ends, and those who have ended it so abide, surely those venerable men, craving not and cool, have by that very fact crossed over and gone beyond, I say. Where do they end, and who, having ended them, so abide? Consider, sir, the monk who, passing wholly beyond the sphere of nothingness, enters and abides in the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. There the perception of the sphere of nothingness ends, and those who have ended it so abide. Surely the guileless man would rejoice at this response. Where the perception of the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception ends, and those who have ended it so abide. Surely those venerable men, craving not and cool, have by that very fact crossed over and gone beyond, I say. Where ends the perception of this sphere, and who, having ended it, so abide? I know not this, I see not this. Who should speak thus? To him this ought to be said. Consider, reverend sir, the monk who, passing wholly beyond that sphere, enters and abides in the ending of perception and feeling. There the perception of the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception ends, and those who have ended it so abide. Surely the guileless man would, without deceit, would rejoice and be glad at this response and say, well said, and thereafter with joined hands honor and reverence him. Verily, monks, these are the 9 attainments of gradual abidings. That's the end of the sutta. So after that, the Buddha goes on to the arupa jhana, called the sphere of infinite consciousness. In that state, the mind, the consciousness becomes infinite, and a person who has this kind of state, he can know things that happen in far away places because the mind opens up and he has infinite consciousness. And then the sphere of nothingness, in that state, he realizes that everything is like mind-made, that there is nothing, it's all, the whole universe is mind-made, exists in consciousness. And basically there is nothing, it is like imagination. And then after that, the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, where the mind is so still that it's almost, the consciousness is almost about to be like a small flame about to be blown off. So sometimes that person is like perceives, and another time is as though he doesn't perceive. That's why it's called the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. And the final state is the state where perception and feeling ends. When perception and feeling ends, then the normal sixth consciousness also ends. So these are the 9 states where the Buddha praises. Now the next few suttas all have to do with states of jhana, concentration. The next one is 9.4.34. Once the Venerable Sariputta dwelt near Rajagaha at the squirrel's feeding ground in the bamboo grove, and there he addressed the monks, saying, "This cool nibbana, reverencers, is happiness. This cool, reverencers, is happiness." Now when he had spoken thus, the Venerable Udayin said to him, "But what herein, reverencer, is the happiness which herein is not sensed?" Stop here for a moment. Nibbana is a state where the senses have stopped. So this monk Udayin wants the Venerable Sariputta to explain. And the Venerable Sariputta continued, "It is verily just that happiness which herein is not sensed. There are, reverencer, these 5 strands of sense desire." What 5? There are forms cognized by the eye, longed for, alluring, pleasurable, lovely, bound up with passion and desire. There are sounds cognized by the ear, smells by the nose, tastes by the tongue, contacts or tangibles cognized by the touch, longed for, alluring, pleasurable, lovely, bound up with passion and desire. These, reverencer, are the 5 strands of sense desire. And the happiness, the well-being arising therefrom is called sensual happiness. Consider, reverencer, the monk who, aloof from sense desire, aloof from unwholesome states, enters and abides in the first jhana. If while he abides in that abiding, perceptions and thoughts accompanied by sense desire beset him, it is indeed for him a disease. Just as some ill amounting to a disease might arise in a happy person, even so those perceptions and thoughts accompanied by sense desire beset him, and indeed it is for him a disease. Now disease is called ill by the Exalted One. Verily, reverencer, it is just in this way that the cool nibbana ought to be understood as happiness. Stop here for a moment. So here, the Venerable Sariputta is explaining that when a monk enters the first jhana, he abides in a very peaceful and a very blissful abiding. And if perceptions and thoughts accompanied by sense desire should beset him, it sort of gets him out of the first jhana. And it is like a happy person becoming sick. So that is why sense disease. So the Sariputta is saying that the cool nibbana ought to be understood as happiness in this way. In other words, he is likening the state of the first jhana itself to nibbana as a very happy, blissful abiding. And he continues, "Again, consider the monk who enters and abides in the second jhana. If perceptions and thoughts accompanied by application, that means apply, beset him, it is disease. It's just this way that the cool and so too in the third jhana, if perceptions and thoughts accompanied by delight, piti, beset him, or in the fourth jhana, if perceptions and thoughts accompanied by pain beset him, or in the sphere of infinite space, if perceptions and thoughts accompanied by form beset him, or in the sphere of infinite consciousness, if perceptions and thoughts accompanied by the sphere of infinite space beset him, or in the sphere of nothingness, if perceptions and thoughts accompanied by the sphere of infinite consciousness beset him, or in the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, if perceptions and thoughts accompanied by the sphere of nothingness beset him, it is indeed for him a disease. Ill amounting to a disease might arise in a happy person. Even so, those things beset him, and indeed they are for him diseases. Now disease is called ill by the Exalted One. Verily, Reverend Sir, it is just in this way that the cool ought to be understood as happiness. And then, Reverend Sir, consider the monk who, passing wholly beyond the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, enters and abides in the ending of perception and feeling, when by wisdom he sees that the asavas are completely destroyed. Verily, Reverend Sir, it is just in this way that the cool ought to be understood as happiness. That's the end of the sutta. So similarly, Venerable Sariputta is saying, if a person abides in the jhana, and some perceptions and thoughts accompanied by a lower state arises, so that it moves him, outs him out of that jhana state. It is just like a happy man becoming sick. He's moved out of that blissful state. So those things that move him out of the blissful state are a disease. So that is why the Venerable Sariputta is giving the simile that when a monk abides in the jhanas, it is such a blissful, happy state, similar to nibbana in a way. So you can see the Arahants and the Buddha themselves, they sometimes liken the jhana states to nibbana.